Hey all, Alex here at your home of the Music Deep Dive, and today it's time for a quick review of the 1864 novella by Fyodor Dostoevsky, Notes from Underground. So, Fyodor Dostoevsky, we have not talked about him on this channel yet. We certainly will talk about him more when we get to some of his novels. Of course, one of the all-time great Russian novelists with works such as Crime and Punishment, The Idiot, The Brothers Karamazov, that sort of thing. And his entire this man led one one of the most interesting literary lives that we've talked about so far, in the sense that he rose to prominence in St. Petersburg, was a part of a few different major literary circles there, published some novels, published some short stories. My only familiarity with Dostoevsky to this point as part of this project was the short story White Nights, which is very depressing, but very well worth a read. Sentenced to prison for being part of a literary group that was reading books that criticized Russia at the time, and ended up spending a number of years in Siberia after the fact. And it is during this kind of time before he eventually goes back to Russia later in his life, that he starts writing what will become some of his most popular works. Now, Notes from Underground is one of a few different novellas and short stories and pieces that he was writing at around this time, the early to mid 1860s. And a lot of people view this as one of the most, I think, important Dostoevsky works, because it presents us with one of the most complex central characters that we have encountered in, I think, any of our literary works thus far. It is a work that foreshadows a whole legion of existentialist thought, existentialist writing, existentialist fiction. And after sitting with this novella, which, if you read it, I mean, it's probably about like 100 pages worth of reading. There's a lot to take in. The entire work is structured around the kind of thoughts, not musings, because musings, I think, implies something a lot more spontaneous and a lot more arbitrary, I suppose, than what this narrator is doing. This narrator is very methodical. They are telling you their thoughts. They are telling you their life story, their philosophies, in a very structured and, very intentional way. And it's very uncomfortable. The narrator is this fundamentally very flawed, very miserable, very unhappy and insecure person. And you were left with that impression right from the beginning. The novella is kind of structured into like two parts. The first part, where the narrator is, going through his kind of perspective on like the world and like his own being, his own state of existence, as kind of a introduction to the events of everything else, to kind of prepare you for what is to happen, and then recap some events in his life, related to his interactions with colleagues and a potential like romantic interest, and how he holds everybody in complete contempt throughout the entire time. But he holds himself in contempt more than anything else. So it's a bunch of instances of, self-sabotage and sabotaging relationships with people. And all the while, like, again, coming from this standpoint of these people are terrible, these people are flawed, because that's what the narrator thinks. But also, still, he manages to hold himself in contempt more than anybody else. It's a very kind of strange dichotomy, where it's like he hates himself so much, yet he continues to do these things because he thinks these other people deserve to suffer as well. And it's revealed in these scenes how much of a complete kind of coward he is as well. He has these long stretches of internal dialogue, like, I wanted to do this, I wanted to say this, and then it doesn't ever actually happen in a lot of these scenes. It's when you read people talking about this, it's interesting to view how many people, it's interesting to read how many people I think empathize a little bit with this character. And I think that's the part that is the most uncomfortable. I think a lot of people who struggle either with not even just being introverted necessarily, but with that sort of like, that like self-loathing, that self-doubt, that lack of self-worth, where you're still okay casting judgment on others, but you cast yourself in more judgment than anything else. People can empathize with this character. And considering how terrible of a character this is portrayed as, like, I do not think that Dostoevsky is intending you to have any sort of empathy really for them or to make them seem sympathetic. The fact that we still feel that level of empathy, I think, says something about us, and I think it says something about the amount of reflection that this novella is going to impose and inspire in you. It's strange, and so when I walk away from it, I certainly walk away with some degree of empathy for the character, but there's also a level of pity. You know, there's a very hyper pathetic element to this character's existence and this character's story. And now, in a sense, I think the larger element of reflection is in myself thinking about how much of my sentiments are true empathy, like, oh, I can relate to even the smallest of degrees, and how much of it is purely pity. Because then in doing that, if it feels more balanced towards the empathetic side rather than the pitiful side, does that mean that I am more like this person than I would ideally like to be? Does that mean that I'm as miserable as they are? I don't know. But that's the kind of thinking that I think this inspires to people who personalize this. And I think even if you don't personalize this, there's still a decent bit to like chew on and grapple with. It's complex. It leaves you kind of sitting with a lot of thoughts that I don't think you were expecting to sit with when you go in, or at least I didn't. But I think that means it's an absolute smash of a success. Writing is brilliant. The translation that I read was really brilliant, and I don't know if it's a Dostoevsky entry point necessarily. Again, I'm not really familiar with his other work, so I'll need to evaluate that and kind of report back. But it's certainly, from a length standpoint, a fairly easy read, or a brief read anyways. Maybe easy is not the right word for it, though. There's a lot going on here. So well worth your time. Check it out if you haven't. And I look forward to covering more Dostoevsky on the channel in the future. With that, thanks so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. As always, more reviews are to come. Make sure to hit that bell for notifications and tell a friend as well. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time right here at your home of the Music Deep Dive.